Kesson will not be here tonight because he had a death in the family, and Ms. Pedro will not be here as well. Mr. Aguiar is on his way, running a couple of minutes late. First up, we have our consent agenda. We have bills to pay. Does anybody have questions on the bills dated at 8/24? If there are none, do we have a motion to receive and place on file?
So moved.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion passes 4-0. Next, we'll be sitting as the Board of License Commissioners. We have peddler's license, all for the Firefly Yoga and Wellness Festival at Glen Park, dated for this coming Saturday, 9/15. We have Sandra Giraldo doing business as Enjoyful Foods at 20 Post Road, Warwick, Rhode Island. Sherry Snyder doing business as Art Inspired by Stillness, 25A Mount Hygeia Road in Foster. And Barbara Lamonaco doing business as Honey and Vine Apothecary. I can't say that word. 274 T-Berry Drive in Tiverton.
Move to approve the 3 peddler licenses.
Seconded.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion passes 4-0. Next, we have 2 annual peddler's licenses. One's for Sprout and Lentil LLC, 28 Hall Avenue in Newport, and one for Angela B. Mandia, doing business as Nirvana at 119 Henry Dennis Court in Portsmouth.
Move to approve.
Seconded.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion passes 7-0. A motion to adjourn from the
So
Board of License Commissioners.
Move to adjourn as the Board of License Commissioners.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion passes 4-0. Next up, we have minutes from the 8/27 Town Council meeting and executive session. Do we have questions on the minutes?
Move to approve the minutes of August 27th.
Minutes and the executive session as well.
And the executive session.
Thank you, sir. Is there a second?
Second.
Any questions on the minutes? All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion passes 4-0. We'll give Mr. Aguirre one more second to get set.
Catch his breath.
Next up, we have tax vouchers of 2018-0910-01, 2018-0910-07.
Move to approve tax vouchers 201-809-1001 through 07.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion passes 5-0. Next up, we have the Town Administrator's Report. Mr. Rayner.
There you go. Good evening, Mr. President, Council, ladies and gentlemen. The Navy is closing Burma Road. It's actually closed as of today for paving work. They anticipate the road to be closed for about a month. This is from Green Lane North all the way up to Stringham. Access to Weaver Cove is still permitted, but there's no through traffic. This will likely, I know this is overstating the obvious, produce more traffic on portions of West Main Road during the rush hours in the morning and evening. This Wednesday, the 2018 statewide primary elections will be held. Schools will be closed, and the polls will open at 7 a.m. and close at 8 p.m. Emergency voting will continue through 4 p.m. tomorrow for those that need to vote early. I reported that John King, our EMA director, he became sick very unexpectedly. In my last council report, unfortunately, Mr. King has passed away. The funeral and memorial service will be held at 4 p.m. on Sunday, September 16th, at the Portsmouth United Methodist Church. And then lastly, with respect to the police construction update, the roof shingles are now at 99%. The flat roof work is expected to start early this week, and the building is expected to be weather tight by the close of the week. At that point, work that depends on dry conditions, interior, mechanical, electrical, and plumbing, will commence next Monday. And that concludes my administrative report, Mr. President.
Anybody have any questions for Mr. Rayner? Thank you, sir. On to old business. First up in old business, we have a public hearing for the proposed amendment to zoning map of Portsmouth, Rhode Island, Article 3, Section B.1 of the zoning ordinance. The proposed amendment, subject to the approval of the dimensional variance from the Zoning Board of Review for minimum lot frontage, also as well as subdivision approval from the Planning Board. Rezones approximately 2.4 acres of parcels currently known as 2951 East Main Road on plats 31 and 32, and 2967 East Main Road, plots 31 and 32A, from the C1 Commercial District to the R20 Residential District, the remaining 3.9 acres of the lots in the front of the building at 2951 East Main Road, 3132, and 2967 East Main Road, 3132A, adjacent to East Main Road, will remain currently designated as C1 Commercial. Ms. Galvin, how are you?
Good evening, Mr. President, members of the council. Neil Galvin, representing the owners of the property. And we're happy to report that we have successfully navigated the planning board process as well as the zoning board process. And we're here this evening to complete the process of seeking a zone change for the rear of the property upon which Borden Farm is located. Borden Farm was once a working 44-acre farm located on East Main Road, and it's one of the few properties in Portsmouth that is located on the National Register of Historic Places. The property consists of two parcels, and they are currently both zoned commercial in the C1 district. The parcels front on East Main Road and also abut the R20 zone to the rear or east of the parcels. There's an existing three-family residential use that is located in the rear of the property. The mixed use on the property is currently a grandfathered non-conforming use in a commercial zone. Rezoning the proposed new parcel to residential would bring the use into compliance with the Portsmouth zoning ordinance. The owners are desirous of making the change because it will permit them to generate the wherewithal to preserve the historic farm and not to have to sell the entire real estate and put the preservation of Borden Farm at risk. We view this as a benefit to all concerned, the town, the owners, and the neighbors. This is a rare instance where a property owner is asking for a downgrade in its zoning classification. Giving up a commercial designation reduces the development opportunities the property currently enjoys. However, the owners are willing to do that as they see a residential designation as being far more palatable to the residential neighborhood that surrounds the rear of the property. We also think that you, as a town council, are in an unusually unique position. Not only have you received a favorable advisory from the planning board, you have the luxury of having both the planning board and the zoning board fully vet the proposed minor subdivision and the request for dimensional relief to have frontage at less than is required by zoning. In this case, the planning board recommended approval of the zone change and approved the minor subdivision subject to zoning approval. The zoning board, after lengthy testimony, also approved the dimensional variance requested, subject to this council's approval of the zone change. It should be noted that a number of neighbors spoke, some in favor and some against. One of the concerns raised was having traffic from a three-family house exit out onto Canonshed Drive. However, it was established that there is no prohibition from the residential traffic using the access to Canonshed Drive as of right now and without any planning or zoning relief. Thus, the traffic would be the exact same for the existing three-family use with or without the zoning relief. Some neighbors are understandably nervous about change. However, they should be assured that any proposed use that is different from the existing use that requires relief would call for planning board review and zoning board approval. Such relief would require hearings at which their concerns would be received and taken into account. In the end, the testimony demonstrated that far more impactful and wide-ranging uses that are allowed in a commercial zone could currently go on the property. By reducing the back zoning to residential, the owner has reduced significantly the impactful use that can be made of the property. I will just have one witness for you this evening. That will be Mr. Borden, John Borden. He will describe why he has made this request. He will also describe that he has no desire to see any low to moderate income housing on the property or to see any density bonuses or anything of that sort. He will also describe what his intentions are in an effort to reassure the neighbors. My final thoughts to you before presenting Mr. Borden are to suggest that you focus on the merits of changing the back portion to residential from commercial. Typically, a council may hesitate to give up its commercial tax base, wanting to preserve as much commercial taxable property as possible. In this instance, as you will see from the exhibit that I'll share with you momentarily, all of the commercially zoned parcel is not being given up. It is simply being made more symmetrical and more appropriate. The portion that sticks out and is surrounded by residential is now proposed to be made residential, with the remainder staying commercial, so the commercial tax base will still remain solid for the town. We hope that you will agree that this is a benefit to all parties and that you will accept the recommendation of the Planning Board and defer to the Zoning Board's approval of the requested zoning relief and conclude that the zoning change should be allowed. As Mr. Knott, the Zoning Board Vice Chair, commented, he has seen over his lifetime many one-time farms be lost to development, and progress inevitably sees those commercial developments being fully developed. Here is an opportunity to preserve an historic farm at the owner's request, and in this instance, hold off the commercial development of a significant portion of this property. I'd like to give to you four exhibits. One is the recommendation of the Planning Board. The other is the plan that has been advertised for hearing this evening. The other two exhibits are one which depicts the commercial zone in relation to the residential zone, so you can see the symmetry of what is being proposed. And the fourth is the proposed plan that shows the zone change. And then I'll call up Mr. Borden.
Alvin, can you go into the clerk for the record, please? Thank you.
Next one is the Planning Board advisory.
This is all in our packet.
Is it already? I'm
Yeah.
sorry, I didn't realize that. I'm not sure if the other plans are in there.
That is not.
No, this is not.
If I may call up Mr. Borden.
Boardman, if you just state, and this for anybody who wants to come up and speak this evening, it's an open public hearing. When you do so, please state your name and your address for the record.
John Borden, 41 Mill Lane, Portsmouth, Rhode Island. Mr. President, members of the council, what I'd like to do is to provide a little background before I get into the specifics of what we're requesting. First of all, I'd like to publicly state that I'm sure most people in the room know, and certainly a lot of council members know, that I'm currently a member of the Zoning Board of Review. We had to appear in front of my own board, if you will, for approval. I called the Rhode Island Ethics Commission and I spoke with one of the lawyers at the Rhode Island Ethics Commission and explained the situation, what I was requesting relief for. And I got a verbal opinion from him that he felt as though that if I recused myself, obviously, from the petition, I should be able to move forward since this property has been in my family since the 1800s. I'm not a developer. I just retired as the budget manager from Roger Williams University. I do not own any other property, commercial or otherwise, other than this property and my personal residence. So I felt comfortable enough to move forward. I also spoke with a couple other local members in the town, and they felt as though that I should be able to move forward. I almost submitted a written evaluation from the Ethics Commission. I did not do that. That said, I'd also like to, I guess, somewhat apologize for what was somewhat of a disruptive zoning board hearing. And I'd like to say, as a member of the board, that is not typically how the zoning board conducts business, and I would apologize for any activities that abutters or interested parties may have experienced, and I would certainly hope that obviously they'll get the chance to convey their full feelings and express their concerns this evening. I certainly respect their right to be heard in any public forum. Next, I'd like to present, I guess, two reasons why we're doing this. The first reason is to answer the question, well, why are you doing this? And the reasons have absolutely nothing to do with zoning approval or a zone change. They're not relevant, but they would explain why we're doing this. My stepmother, who will be 105, has been in the nursing home for quite some time. The financial responsibility to do that and make repairs on the property, realistically, you can't do both. The property has, even though it looks nice, it needs mechanical systems, it needs new roofs, it needs a fair amount of repairs and maintenance. Something has to give. So I analyzed the property and said, well, okay, what's the least significant part of the property? The 6 remaining acres, what remain of what used to be a 44-acre working farm, is on the National Register. It's actually recognized an historic district. As such, all of the buildings in this district are on the National Register. The Victorian in the front is the most significant, built in 1865. The barn that was built in 1890 is the second most significant building. The other outbuildings are also significant. The house in the rear that's currently a 3-family is the least significant. It used to be the gardener's cottage. It was the house of essentially the foreman of the farm, built in around 1900. It was added onto by my parents in 1960 for an addition, and it, in my opinion, was a portion of the property that could be sacrificed, if you will. 21 years ago, we purchased 28 Canonsha Drive. We then realigned the lot lines, and we In order to conform with the frontage at 28 Canonchit Road, we dedicated 110 feet of frontage, and we took whatever was left, which was 43 feet of frontage that roughly extends between 90 and 100 feet toward the west into our property. We combined that portion with our lot with the specific intent of trying to do something residential in the rear of the property. My intent was to do it myself and maintain the entire 6 acres. Unfortunately, we're now in a position where we have to sell that rear portion in order to keep the rest of the farm. So that said, that's the reason why we're doing this. From a zoning perspective, a planning perspective, and a land use perspective, I said to myself, okay, what's going to have the least impact on the neighborhood and be a win-win? Having sat on several zoning petitions where residential property abuts commercial property, there's always an abundance of testimony from residential abutters that their property is going to be ruined because they're going to have commercial development with dumpsters, light pollution, pavement, deliveries, noise abutting their backyard. So I honestly believe that this would be a win-win in that the neighbors, instead of the potential of looking at 4 acres of pavement and 70% lot coverage, they would have grass, houses, residential use in their backyard as opposed to a commercial development. I understand, and again, I respect all the neighbors' concerns that there's change. They're going to see activity back there now, residential or commercial, where they hadn't seen it in the past. So some traffic concerns were raised, and I would encourage everyone to listen to their testimony this evening. However, my feeling is that it will not create a hazard, and that residential outflow can be absorbed into the neighborhood. I also feel that from a comprehensive community plan perspective, compatibility of surrounding land uses, when you look at the zoning map and you look at what's commercial now, and you look at the 12 abutting houses that are residential surrounding that development, if that rear portion were rezoned to residential, you would have compatibility of surrounding land uses, and you would essentially eliminate the potential of a large commercial development. Maybe not in my lifetime, but down the road. Zoning goes with the land, not with the specific property owner. So my thought would be that this is the best interest in Portsmouth, regardless of who owns it, whether it's me, the abutters. Those abutters' houses will change hands and ownership will change hands. In my opinion, this is the best use of the property to rezone it for compatibility of surrounding land uses purposes. I also would like to add that I was surprised with the residential abutters' testimony, and I did listen to them. My intention, I'm not a developer, my intention was to create the lot and sell it to either a single-family property owner or a developer. I did develop another plan to see what conceptually could be built there. I had my engineer kind of max out the water table and the perk analysis, which was very poor. There's ledge there, it's not good. But he came up with a plan that would put 2 more structures there and 2 duplexes. So at a meeting with the abutters, I showed that to them, and there were questions raised whether I had ulterior motives and I was going to come back with an amended plan. My plan was to sell it as is, not develop it. I'm not a developer. Certainly that would be something that a developer could do. Since I've heard all of the abutters, I'm now in a position to basically commit to following through to try to get permission to put 4 single-family lots there. I would have to get permission from the planning board. Maybe I'd have to go back to the zoning board, which I'm not crazy about going back to my own board to get approvals, but if I were to do that, that would then guarantee that you wouldn't have a multifamily development with the potential for LMI and density bonuses that could go there. So that's pretty much a background, and if the council members have any questions or there's anything I didn't cover, fire away.
Any members of the council have any questions? Mr. Gleason?
Just have one. So basically what you're saying is you're going to demolish the existing building in the back.
No, that's not my plan. The plan is to keep that building and abandon the 3-family use and turn it into a single-family structure. That would exist on one of the lots. If I were able to create 4 lots, and again, it might be 3 lots. I have to go, this is all new. I have to meet with the engineer. I have to see about configuration of lots. I have to see about roadways. I have to get quotes for what it's going to cost to bring the water in. These are all things I have to do, but I listen to the abutters. I'm willing to try to follow through and not have a larger multifamily LMI development there with multi-housing.
Okay, so if I understand you correct, it's either going to be the existing house and then 2 houses and 2 duplexes, or this existing house and potentially 4 additional houses.
Well, that's a good, I'm sorry if I misled you. I mentioned that I did create a plan that had 2 duplexes on it to see, that may have caused some confusion amongst the abutters, to see what could be built on the property. My plan at that time was to not develop it and to sell it, and to say to a potential developer, this is what could be built on the property. Since listening to the abutters, now I'm proposing to try to get approval for 3 or 4 lots, keeping the existing farmhouse, converting it from a 3-family to a single family, and then creating 3 vacant lots. So there would be a total of 4 lots. 1 would have a structure on it, and the other 3 lots would be put on the market for sale as probably about 22,000 square feet each, which, since it's an R20 zone, in order to build a duplex, you need 1.5 times the zone square footage. So you need 30,000 square feet in order to build a duplex, or greater, to build a duplex. By having the 4 single-family lots at 22,000 each, that completely eliminates any chance of anyone building a duplex. The only structure you could build on each of those single-family lots would be a single-family residence. I'm not sure, Dave, if I answered your question.
You did, because that's why I was confused at how you're going to
Sorry.
use all that on the
Yeah,
property
yeah.
with that house staying
No,
there.
good question.
Okay,
Yeah.
thank you. Just one other quick one.
Sure.
The proposed side yard setbacks, you would know better than I. Are those mandatory?
The side yard setbacks are mandatory unless you get a zoning, you petition for a dimensional variance in front of the zoning board. My plan would be to maintain all of the dimensional setbacks, which is 30 feet front and rear, and 15 feet for side yard setbacks in an R20 zone.
Thank you very much.
Yes, I'm
And,
sorry.
Under yours, you did divide this into 4 different lots, then, and 4 houses were built on them, and all 4 houses would be exiting via a common road, I guess, between 28 and 36 Canachet.
That's correct. That's correct.
So that would be a new road going.
Yes. Which, what I did was I looked at, and there's 43 feet of frontage, and probably half the roads in Portsmouth are not standard size because they were all built in the 50s and 60s, and there are some private roads and private ways that are, for example, Moniz Way, which is off Union Street, was approved by the Planning and Zoning Board, and it's 14 feet wide in pavement, and they own 30 feet of frontage on Union Street. So it's not uncommon on small developments of this size to have 3 or 4 lots, to have, I don't imagine that the paved section would be more than 15 feet. And it may not even be paved. It may be gravel with shells, seashells, to keep the country flavor. What somebody does down the road with it, I will have no control. Again, my plan is to sell it, put the money into Board and Farm, and I will not retain any ownership interest in the rear portion of the property.
Mr. Hager?
Mr. Board, if it were to go to a 3 or 4 lot subdivision, I think you've already said it once or twice, but I just wanted to reiterate it. Everything has to go back to the planning board or back to the zoning board for the specific type of development that's going to occur.
That's exactly correct.
So if there were any concerns, those things would be vetted again in a public meeting at both boards.
That's correct.
Tonight, you're only looking for the 1 lot to change that rezone into residential. It's still 2.4 acre lot.
Correct.
Well, I'll be turning 2 separate lots into 1 large lot. You'd be taking on a
we're-
property
we're-
line.
He's combining 2 lots into 3, 2 commercial lots.
Yes.
and a third.
Yes.
Right.
Correct.
But the residential lot in the back half, the front half, it's the historic farm, but it is technically commercial. And if and when, some point down the road, if you're no longer the owner of that parcel, that could be converted to a commercial development. Is that a fair statement?
Yeah, it's in a commercial zone, there's no way.
It's a
to
commercial
avoid that.
zone. I'm talking down the road.
Oh, yes, yes.
Down the road. Down the
Correct.
road, because the zoning goes with the land.
Correct.
So it may not be tomorrow. It could be 10 years down the road or 15 years down the road. That's a large, probably one of the larger commercial properties along East Main Road.
That's correct, and it currently exists all the way back.
No,
Shooting into the residential piece. That's right.
I'm well aware of the overall size. So the overall size of this parcel, as it stands, is probably one of the largest undeveloped commercial properties on East Main Road.
6.25 acres, that's correct.
Mrs. Giuffus?
I'm just wondering about the driveway. If this remained a commercial property, it would also have a driveway in the same location and be the entry and exit point for any commercial operations, would it not?
It would be for the residential structure that's back there now, the 3-family. That has current ability to use that access on Conchard Drive in and out at any time. There's no relief needed for that, to serve the residential piece.
Mr. Galvin, I'm just going to ask you to do one favor. If you're going to speak, just move the microphone, that's all. Thank you.
Gotcha.
So you can hear you at home.
Correct me if I'm wrong, but I think you were asking is if the entire parcel was developed commercially, could they use that back portion to
Correct.
access Canonjit? And that's a really good question, and I've heard mixed feelings, mixed interpretations of this. I guess it would come down to a solicitor or legal opinion, but that portion, that 43-foot portion on Canonjit Drive of frontage that we incorporated into our parcel was zoned residential. However, it was incorporated into our lot, map 31, lot 32, which if you look at the zoning ordinance and the list of commercial lots, it's listed as 1 lot. There's no footnote in the zoning ordinance that defines that 43 feet as having to be residentially used. So, I mean, if I were to develop it, I would never have commercial use go through a residential neighborhood. That just wouldn't be something I do. But whether somebody else could do it, I don't know. I'm not sure if I answered your question.
Right, no, just curious, because I understand that the major concern of abutters is that there's going to be increased traffic through that driveway. Is that right? And are you taking are there mitigating measures that can be taken to answer those abutters' concerns?
Well, and that's another really good question. And I'd just like to point out that typically when the planning board creates subdivisions, they create a lot of paper roads, if you will, for future development. In my opinion, this is really no different than a paper road. It nearly meets the 50-foot requirement. You have a development that's going in Windrock Estates or Windrock Acres that's currently being planned in Windstone with 12 lots that all of a sudden is going to go right through the Windstone subdivision, and those neighbors are going to have 12 additional lots and cars dump into their lot. The residential additional traffic that goes into those subdivisions, it's pretty much been defined as that's an enforcement issue. It's a residential street. The speed limit is 15 miles an hour, supposedly. And everyone is supposed to be cognizant of the fact that it's a residential neighborhood, stop at stop signs and obey. Now, whether that happens or not is another question. But again, you have a residential use going into a residential neighborhood as opposed to the potential of a commercial development accessing into a residential zone.
Okay. Any further questions from the council? Thank you, gentlemen. I'll now open up for a public comment. If anybody would like to come up and speak either for or against this zoning change, please do so. Come up to the podium, and again, please state your name and your address for the record. Good evening.
Name is John O'Brien, 51 Canaccia Drive. Mr. President, members of the council, first off, I trust you received my letter of September 7th regarding the conduct of zoning board member Hall, so I won't repeat my points made therein. But I do appear before you tonight to ask you to consider a pause in this process so that the neighbors be given an opportunity to be heard before a regulatory body, absent the threat of intimidation or other improprieties. I would also note that the neighbors who did testify last week, due to Mr. Hall's abusive behavior, there were many who, in fact, were intimidated not to testify, my wife being one of them. So the zoning board did not, in fact, hear all the testimony that they could have last week from the neighbors. And the neighbors, frankly, were intimidated out of their rights to testify. I would also note the appearance of impropriety when the petitioner's attorney reportedly followed Mr. Hall when he left this chamber in a huff and encouraged him to return for the vote. And the outright impropriety of Mr. Hall's apology to the petitioner upon his return to the hall. Not to any of the members that he yelled and screamed at, but to the petitioner himself. I would suggest that the zoning process was tainted. And in fact, some of the board members may in fact have been intimidated by Mr. Hall, because on his explanation of his vote, he went into another rant. So, in conclusion, and based upon the aforementioned shortcomings of the recent zoning board meeting, I would respectfully request that the council consider taking the following actions. Table action on the planning board's recommendation and direct the board to meet with the neighbors so that their concerns can be heard. And number two, the council as appointing authority not accept Mr. Hall's resignation, but rather terminate his appointment for due course. This will send a loud message to other boards and commissions that such behavior will not be tolerated. Thank you for the opportunity to comment. If there's any questions.
I appreciate your comments, Mr. O'Brien. because, and I will ask the solicitor to weigh in on this, but because of the way the petition is written and the way the hearing is written, we are here to decide on a zoning change itself. I understand what happened on, and I do apologize on behalf of the council for the actions and that the zoning board member took. I haven't watched the tape yet. I have received various emails and comments on it. But what's in front of us tonight is a zoning change that we did receive a favorable opinion from the planning board. And I'm not sure, just because of the way it's advertised, and again, I'll go to the solicitor as to whether or not I guess we could table it.
Well, you want me to weigh in now?
Yeah.
You're right, that tonight is a request to rezone the designated area from commercial to residential, and that's basically it. Rezoning involves a request to the council, which gets sent to the planning board and the planning department, who will make a recommendation. The zoning board of review is not part of the request to amend the ordinance or the zoning map to change it from commercial to residential. Similarly, the council has no role in the zoning board of review considering or granting the request for a dimensional variance. The council has no authority to direct the zoning board to do anything. The decision was made, a decision will be drafted and signed and recorded, at which point any agreed party could appeal to the Superior Court. That would be the next step if someone wanted to challenge the zoning board's decision from last week. But that's really separate and apart from the council's role on a request to rezone and what's before the council tonight.
So, being that the zoning board is a separate and essentially the only authority, quote unquote, and I'm using that in air quotes, that the council has is to appoint members to the zoning
To
board.
appoint members, correct.
If I may?
And the council has authority to remove a member for due cause.
Correct.
If I may?
Mr. O'Brien, yes.
I'm not asking you to table the action of the zoning board.
No, you're
I'm
asking
asking you to table tonight's action, which is approval of the planning board's recommendation to rezone. And in doing that, the neighbors would meet with the planning board and discuss measures to possibly mitigate the negative impacts of this proposed rezoning.
If the rezoning that Mr. Borden brought forth tonight in changing this into 3 to 4 single-family house lots, if he were to go forward with that, it would go back to the planning board where you would have your ability to hear your voices, have your voices heard. Sorry.
If he doesn't go forward with that, we're still faced with a what I saw as proposed is a 12-foot driveway providing access and egress to, we don't know the number of vehicles from that, without any buffering for either neighbors on either side or to the rear. Those are the types of issues that we would like to get before the planning board and work out with both the petitioner and the planning board. And that is fully within the jurisdiction of the planning board to put those kinds of conditions.
Yes, it is. Mr. Aguirre.
Mr. O'Brien, and maybe the attorney can clarify this, or Mr. Gavin can clarify this, but if the zone change were to go forward, what that lot is right now, it's a residential lot with one mixed use, one lot, one house on it.
It's a commercial, right now it's a commercial lot with one house.
It's a commercial lot, but if it were to go forward, it's one lot with a residential property on it.
Correct.
There's nothing else proposed on it at this point. Anything that they would propose to develop would then go back to the planning board and to the zoning board. So the only traffic that would be generated would be based on that single use that's there now, which is a residential property.
The three-family
The
house.
three-family home.
Which again, still does not does not address any of the buffering for, again, if you look at the map, you've got two abutters to that access road. Literally, their property's right on top of that. Right now, there is I believe, a 2.5, 3-foot fence, which buffers nothing along that property. I'm simply asking, again, given the treatment to the neighbors at the zoning board hearing last week, for the neighbors to be given an opportunity to work out the differences or express what they would like to see, with the understanding that this is very likely to go forward as a rezoning, and that there will be, that parcel will be used for access. But again, it's within your purview to table that and direct the planning board to do that. That's simply what I'm asking.
We can't direct the planning board to go forth with a petition that doesn't exist. So they
No,
don't have a
the-
plan in front of them to go in front.
It's the same petition. You would simply be asking them to go back. They supposedly had a public hearing at the beginning of the process, although under that process, abutters aren't notified. That's simply, as opposed to the zoning process where abutters are notified. If they were, I certainly wasn't notified.
The planning board simply, it's referred to the planning board for an advisory recommendation to the council on whether to change that area from a C to an R. That's all that's before this council.
And through the planning board's process, that was a public hearing?
Yes.
And as part of that public hearing, it was to convert those lots in the rear to a residential lot, which would have been based on that residential use. So I'm wondering, did the planning board already take this into consideration in converting it and making an advisory opinion to allow it to go to residential?
Yes, I believe that's in the packet. And
Right.
the thing is, but right now, there's a 3-family residential that's in a commercial district that's non-conforming. If you change it to an R, it's going to be a 3-family residential building. It's still non-conforming, but it's more conforming because it'll be in a residential district. If they want to do any of these
Right.
proposals, it's going to have to be a real proposal and go to the appropriate boards for consideration.
So I guess my point is that the planning board has already considered the change in the use to the residential based on the use that's out there now, which is one multifamily home. That's probably what they based their decision on.
Again, I don't want to be argumentative, but again, my point is that the neighbors who were not given their opportunities, again, given what happened at the zoning board meeting, to fully express the concerns about the egress and access to that property.
But that's the zoning board, not the planning board. I'm just trying to.
Right,
We
but
started with the plan. I'm just trying to understand, from the planning board's perspective.
I'm not saying the planning board did, I'm sorry to interrupt you, I'm not saying they did not do their job, but they did do their job. What I'm saying is, give the neighbors an opportunity to meet with the board, and it's not going to be the zoning board. If you set this back to the zoning board with the request to meet with the neighbors, I don't think the neighbors would show up. I know I certainly wouldn't. It's the planning board, and again, it's certainly within the planning board's jurisdiction to recommend certain buffers around what will admittedly be an undersized access road that abuts two residential properties.
In its current state.
I'm sorry, it's not a road. Let me correct
It's a driveway.
myself. It's a driveway.
In its current state, a driveway would be allowable now, without any change. They could put shells down, make it a 12-foot driveway, call it a driveway into the back of that lot, without discussing anything with the neighbors. What Mr. Borden has put forth is that he's willing to change this to 3 to 4 single-family homes, and through that process, the neighbors would be availed of that at the planning board when they would make their decision on how to best separate those lots.
And I guess my counterpoint to that is that's not a condition of anything, that Mr. Borden go through with those plans. once this is approved and rezoned, he can put that on the market tomorrow.
And-
Sell it to a
and-
developer.
Who would have to then petition the planning board to do whatever they wanted to that lot. So no matter what happens with the lot, if the council decides to go forth with the change or not, any changes in the future would have to go before the planning board to create a minor subdivision of 3 to 4 lots, or if it's whatever it is. I like to think I could take Mr. Borden at his word that he's going to make 3 to 4 lots out
I
of it.
would too. Don't get me
Yeah.
wrong. You know, I'm about process,
Mhm.
and this process to date has been tainted. And the neighbors would like some way to address that.
Mr. President, I just also want to clarify. The process for zoning amendment is dictated by the Zoning Enabling Act. And again, the opportunity for abutters to be heard is what's happening tonight at the public hearing on the proposed zoning amendment. The Planning Board simply gave you a recommendation. Now, this is the hearing on the proposed amendment, and the abutters were notified, and there were 3 advertisements in the newspaper, and that's what we're here for tonight. Just to simply change this area from a C to an R, or not.
And since you're the solicitor, you can correct me if I'm wrong here, but even if that change does not go forward, we still have a 3-family residential home on a non-conforming commercial lot that theoretically could take a bulldozer, go down through the easement and create a driveway there today.
I really don't want to speculate on the use of the little arm there, because it's just, I want to see a real proposal about what they're doing.
But even if none of this was happening right now, and Mr. Borden came in and said, hey, you know what, I'm going to have people exit out the back, I'm going to put a driveway in there. He has the right to do that today.
Theoretically, he does.
Okay. Ms. Ujiflusi.
I just want to say, Mr. O'Brien, I understand. I read your letter, and as well as another participant at the meeting, and what their concerns were about the meeting, and I do believe that there was potentially very inappropriate behavior on the part of a board member. Nonetheless, I think the question is whether right today those abutters would have an opportunity to comment on the concerns that you're raising, right? And those concerns involve adding houses to the existing property. And that question is not what's before the town council right now. We're not talking about a plan to add houses. That proposition will occur later, and it seems that is when that proposition comes before a planning board, or even again to the zoning board, that would be when all the abutters could address those concerns. Do you disagree with that?
Well, only in that, by approval of this, you've added 3 residential units that access. Well, he's got a three-family property there now. So by approval of this tonight, you've added access for 3 residential units through Canachet Drive that were not there prior to this.
But that already exists.
Wow.
If
That you have a parcel of residentially zoned property on Canachet Drive abutting a commercial piece. Again, my planning background, I would not want to tell you definitively whether or not that is a rare instance. So I'll leave it at that.
that was my question to the solicitor, whether or not, as of the way it's set up today, they could put a driveway in there to that 3-family without anybody's approval at all.
Again, you know, that's his opinion. I frankly would I may come up with something different than that, given two
I said
different
theoretical.
zoning uses.
If someone puts in something and someone complains, it goes to the zoning official, and then it works its way through the process. That's why I'm reluctant to speculate.
So we're both reluctant.
And I'm also frankly reluctant to speculate on if someone knocked down everything and put some intense commercial development, I wouldn't want to speculate whether they could use that strip of land to access the intense commercial development. I think that would be subject to question.
But that might
But
be
that's
something-
all, again, it's
Right.
hypothetical.
But that could be something that the planning board comes in and says, I need a secondary access, or the fire department comes in and says, I want a secondary access in case there's an emergency, and they may insist that that be put in as an access. It's true.
Through a residential neighborhood?
Well, again,
It's all speculation until there's a plan.
That's right.
Yeah, it is.
So there will be a process in the future if whatever plan comes forth through the planning board that all the abutters will be able to discuss if it is changed.
I'll let the rest of my neighbors speak.
Absolutely. Mr. Galvin?
Mr. President, before you take further testimony, I just wanted to clarify for the record, since my name was referenced as possibly doing something inappropriate, I want to state for the record that I remained in the front row, did not leave this room, did not speak to Mr. Hall at all concerning this particular matter. And for that to be inferred is totally inappropriate, and I just want to state that for the record, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, sir. Would anybody else like to speak? If you could just take your time, come up to the podium again, just name and address for the record, please.
My name is David Getzinger. I live at 2908 East Main Road, Portsmouth. I guess I'm in a butter, as are probably 9,000 other people who aren't here tonight. I think you should give special consideration to Mr. Borden's purpose. There's not any historic zoning in Portsmouth, and despite the fact that the town dates from 1638, we do not have a lot of 17th century houses to show people our history. We have a diminishing number of 18th century houses. And the Borden Farm, the 19th century Second Empire house, is one of the most elegant buildings in the town. I suppose the people attending St. Paul's Church would question that, but those two are really the most attractive 19th century buildings we have. And his motivation is to save that building. And that's really generous. And it's a difficult job, saving a building like that. I have a little experience. If you don't appreciate the difficulty, you're not going to be able to pick up the phone book and find contractors who can work on something like that. And you're not going to be able to go to Home Depot and buy the eastern white pine you need. It's a very difficult and expensive process. And it's very much to his credit as a citizen of Portsmouth that he would undertake a task like that. That's really all I want to say. I think it's very deserving that you should approve his request. I just want to make one other minor note. If the president's living on Conotchet, if I lived on Conotchet, I would be worried that that back parcel would stay commercial. And even if there's another access to it, it would always be very unsightly to look at. Commercial property doesn't help residential property in suburban America. And if you think that you couldn't enter commercial property from a residential street, it's done now. Look at Mr. Udenbach's commercial development on Potomac Avenue. The entrance is from Potomac, which is a residential street. Even the entrance from the Dunkin' Donuts from Village Way is a residential street. I would feel that if I wanted to buy that property and put in a commercial development, I could argue that I can use that entrance from Conotchet. Thank you very much for listening. I hope you'll make a wise decision.
Thank you, Mr. Getzinger.
Hi, my name is Susan Ryder Lewis, and I live at 28 Conotchet Drive.
Ms. Lewis, can you do me one favor? Okay, thank you.
Susan Ryder Lewis, 28 Conotchet Drive. Only so I don't get emotional, I'm going to read my statement. I have now sat through planning meetings and zoning meetings where I have been told repeatedly by committee members that I do not know what I'm talking about and I should be supporting this change. I live here. They do not, and neither does Mr. Borden or his family members. It is my bedroom windows that headlights will be shining into at all hours of the night. It is my person, my privacy, and my property that will be at risk should someone skid off the tightly spaced driveway to be squeezed between mine and my neighbor's home. It is on my deck in my backyard where the tenants living in Mr. Borden's dwellings will have a front row seat to my life. Many of my neighbors also have stood before the planning and zoning boards to publicly voice their concerns. Not only have those concerns been dismissed by Mr. Borden and his lawyer, but also by the members of the committee on which Mr. Borden sits, as they pushed his request through without concessions or considerations for those it will ultimately affect. One member of the zoning board went as far as to verbally assault and barrage us with insults. I have been told repeatedly by the planning board and the zoning board that he can put a driveway in now should he choose. Although I have not finished yet, I am in the process of reading the Portsmouth zoning ordinance cover to cover. What I do know is that we would not be here right now if looking for approval for a variance was not necessary to convert this section of land from commercial to residential. The request is to convert this parcel from commercial to R20 with a variance, which means the property can be subdivided into 4 to 5 20,000 square foot lots. Currently, he does not have the frontage for one dwelling, let alone 5. Multiply the number of potential dwellings by the amount of traffic they will create, and I may as well just cut to the chase and put cameras in my home so the whole town can watch. Do I want this driveway? Absolutely not. But I realize that with Mr. Borden sitting on the zoning committee, he will more than likely get what he wants from them. Such is politics in a small town, I guess. Still, I am also a tax-paying member of this town, and I feel that my concerns should not have been poo-pooed and dismissed as frivolous. So I am requesting that the town council not accept the proposal as is, but return the decision to the planning board with concessions to be made for those who will ultimately be affected. For example, my property borders Fair Oaks Limited on 2 sides. When you take into account this extremely narrow strip of land, should he be allowed to construct a driveway on that strip, I will essentially be living in his fishbowl. At the very least, I would like to have seen a natural buffer of 5 feet of mature arborvitae trees placed on the borders of mine and Fair Oaks Limited's land, on their land at their expense, including the entire expanse of the proposed driveway. I'm not one to interfere with the privacy afforded to others, but I also value my own privacy.
Thank you. We unfortunately cannot put those types of restrictions.
But the planning board
The
can.
planning board can, which is where Mr. Borden's proposal will go back to if he has anything other than that 3-family house that currently exists there. So when that hearing is, you will be able to address that and ask for some of those concessions that you just brought forth. And the planning board in the past, in other areas, have worked with, and I'm sorry, John, but I'm going to call you a developer, work with developers to create those types of buffers on both commercial and residential properties where there are issues of, as you say, sight lines and headlights and things like that. It's been my experience that the planning board does listen and does take that into consideration when a petition comes forth.
I do know that I've gone to the planning, I was at that first planning board meeting, and I felt very dismissed. I felt like nobody heard anything I was saying, no one cared what I was saying, their decisions were made up. And I felt like that at the zoning board meeting as well. And my property is the property that he owned, and it used to go all the way over, and he shrunk it. And that was 20 years ago. So why, 20 years ago, there had to be the foresight to keep that little piece of land for something, because I don't know what sense it made to just keep that little piece of land. So in my eyes, the idea that this is a new proposal is doesn't make sense to me, because when I moved in there 20 years ago, I had neighbors come up to me and they're like, you know what that little piece of land is for, right? So I've been hearing these things, these rumblings for years. And my thing is like, when he owned my property, he put no buffer between my property and his property. So literally, if I'm in my backyard, I can just go right like this onto his yard. If I'm on my side yard, I can go right like this onto his side yard. There's nothing that borders there. If there's a road, like if they want to build 5 additional dwellings, so then you have a street, then you have another street. Well, now I have the street, a driveway, a street, I've ordered 3 sides on asphalt. I mean, I brought these considerations up, and even when I was at the planning meeting, and I felt like they could have done something then. They could have said, oh, well, let's look at this. Nobody did. Nobody cared. And, I just keep feeling defeated because every single time I go up there, I'm not against somebody being able to do with their land what they want to do, but don't do it at somebody else's expense. And this is exactly what this is. I mean, I'm not against somebody making money, but I am against somebody making money if I'm going to lose money in the process. And all I want is for it to go back to the planning board, and I want our concerns to be heard. And when he had that meeting and we went, and it was like a day or 2 later was the planning meeting. Most people didn't even understand what the letter was. I attended, and my next door neighbor attended the planning meeting. A lot of us didn't have a chance. It was the middle of summer. Half the families were on vacation. And all I want is to go back and for our concerns to be heard. And for somebody to go, okay, yeah, that makes sense. Maybe we can do this, or maybe we can do this, because the whole thing is about turning it to residential. If it wasn't being turned to residential, there wouldn't be a variance needed, because everybody says he can build it now, he can build the driveway now, he can build the driveway now. Right, he can build the driveway now, but he can't build another one behind it if it stays commercial. So I just want my concerns to be heard. That's all I'm asking.
I'm going to defer this to Mr. Aguirre, but if it stays commercial, most likely there would be a lot more asphalt behind you.
And I also know that there are zoning ordinances with commercial property, and that natural buffer would have to be built.
Go ahead.
From a buffer standpoint, though, you're only talking about an arborvitae hedge or something like that.
Not a hedge, a tree, an arborvitae tree.
An arborvitae, and I spent a number of years on the zoning board, and I listened to a number of petitions, commercial
I know you did.
petitions, and rarely do we see one go in this direction of someone trying to downgrade a property. Usually, when it becomes a commercial development, and you can look around, there are very few buffers. It's only been the last 10 years where we've started to, through the planning board and zoning board, tried to really make sure that there was an adequate buffer or screen buffer. But on a large commercial development, if a commercial property were to go in there, I think you'd have a lot more objection to a commercial development, the impacts associated with a commercial
And maybe I would, but what I'm saying to you right now is, even as it stands, our concerns were not heard. They weren't heard, and if doing what he wants to do, because I got to tell you, whether it's commercial or it's residential, and if I'm going to be asphalt, I want a buffer. And I shouldn't have to bear that expense.
And that's what comes up when the final plan is put forth before the planning board. The planning board process that went through this summer, and Mr. Gavin, again, correct me if I'm wrong, was just an advisory opinion as to whether the planning board felt that changing this to residential lots conformed and worked within the comprehensive community plan.
But they did 2 things. They did that, and they also approved the subdivision of the 2 lots conditioned upon approval
And a
of the zoning
variance.
change.
And the variance.
No, the zoning board of review did the variance.
Oh, but regardless, what I'm saying.
And I really should point out, too, but in terms of this, there's been a request a couple times to this council to refer the matter back to the planning board. I believe they mean on the decision to allow the subdivision. And again, the council has no authority, in my view, to do that. If someone wants to appeal from the planning board, the appeal is to the planning board of appeals, which is the zoning board sitting as the planning board of appeals. There's not an appeal to this council from either of the decisions of the planning board or of the zoning board of review. This council's here in a legislative capacity to decide whether or not to approve the rezoning.
Mr. Chairman, a point of order. I can see this room is just packed, and there are people standing in line, and it's already 10 minutes after 8, and just out of courtesy to everyone who's here and would like to speak, I'd like to make a recommendation that we limit everybody's comments to 2 minutes, knowing that, if you have more to say, you can certainly present it to us outside this meeting, but I just feel that we owe the courtesy to the folks who are sitting here to allow them to have a say. So, I mean, that would be my
If there's
suggestion.
anybody that feels aggrieved, we can go there. Ms. Lewis, are you,
I just wanted to...
I know you're not satisfied.
But Ms. Lewis, and I would think from a residential development standpoint, I mean, even if it were to go back, the residential development would be less intense because there's only 20 or 25% lot coverage.
So now you're the third person that's now told me that
I'm not-
I don't know what I'm talking about and that...
I'm not saying that.
That I should like this.
I'm not saying that one
That's the
bit.
third time.
I'm not saying that one bit. I'm saying that for buffers and things like that, you have a better opportunity when it's a residential development because there's less lot coverage. So if things were to go back to, if this were to move forward and it were to go back to the planning board for a minor subdivision, those are the type of considerations that can be factored into a decision if it were to move forward. Because there is less lot coverage.
Okay, but please also understand that we went to the zoning board meeting with good intentions. You didn't see what happened there. And as far as I'm concerned, we were all basically given the middle finger and said, no matter what, this is going through whether you like it or not. And I hope that you read that transcript and I hope that you see what happened in that meeting. Because, like Mr. O'Brien said, it was extremely intimidating. And now, it's free for even to me to get up here. I'm not usually shaky and nervous, but that's how I feel because of everything that I've gone through. And I just feel like from day one, we haven't been listened to, and that's all I have to say. And I just don't know how, we can just keep, he's still on the zoning board. It's going to happen again. No matter what happens, we're just not going to be listened to. And it's sad that I live in a town and that just doesn't care. So that's all
I
have
would
to say.
disagree with the characterization that we don't care. Anybody else? Yes. Come on, please come forward. If you have something or you want to speak in either direction, please come up to the podium.
Thank you, Mr. President and members of the council. I'd like to say that I'm in support. Yes.
I'm sorry.
Oh, I'm so sorry. Nancy Weeder, 206 Conancha Drive.
Thank you.
Sorry.
That's okay.
I'd like to say that I'm in support of the proposed zoning ordinance change that was submitted by John and Susan Borden, and I'd like to take a few minutes to explain why. I do understand why people in the neighborhood do not want this change. The Borden Farm is a beautifully kept piece of property that John has worked hard to maintain, and almost anyone would like to abut this property. If there weren't valid reasons to change, I'm sure John and Susan would like to keep it the same. To give a little pertinent information, John is my brother. We spent many of our early years living in the house in the back. We both have fond memories of the open farmland that our family owned. Our family was unable to keep it as a farmland because of the expenses and the basic lack of income for the property. So the land, except for what is presently the Borden Farm, was sold and the neighborhood was developed, much to the dislike of some of the people who lived in the area, but they didn't have to pay for the upkeep and change became necessary. Besides that bit of history, my husband and I are also invested in this neighborhood. In 1978, we built our house on 206 Conancha Drive, raised our children, and we've lived there ever since, 40 years this year. We love this neighborhood as many people do. The most important part of the existing Borden Farm from a historical point of view is the front. Portsmouth is rich in history. The Borden Farmhouse is one of the few properties in Portsmouth that is listed on the National Register of Historic Places, something that just doesn't happen. It's quite a process and a labor that Portsmouth should be proud of. By supporting John's efforts to keep the farmhouse in good working order, we are keeping part of Portsmouth's history alive. John has worked in maintaining this land for most of his adult life. Some people may think he's making money doing this, not the case at all. Owning a house of this size that was built in the 1860s is a huge endeavor and quite frankly a money pit. Then add on the barn and the other buildings. There are so many major improvements that have to be made and the money is not there. Actually, the only way John and Susan could make money on this place is if they sold the whole thing and then someone came in and could make the changes and if it was left zoned commercial. The land is about the same size as the land that was used to build Clements Market. John hasn't worked this hard to sell it. He has worked this hard to keep it as an historic property and hopefully pass it down to the next generation in the family. The thought was that rezoning the back property to residential would maintain the integrity of the residential abutting neighborhood and to provide the financial backing to fix the front historic house. I would not want commercial businesses to have the opportunity to come into this area if the request for the zoning change is not granted and the land continues to be zoned commercial. Please support this opportunity to turn commercial property to residential. It is the best long-term solution for our neighborhood and has a positive impact on Portsmouth by helping to preserve a historic place. Thank you for allowing me to speak, and I appreciate you considering my thoughts. I have just one other quick comment. Our son, Jason Wida, would like to have been here tonight, but he was not able to. He did send an email to the council, and he asked that I give you a copy, admit it for the record. Is that possible
Absolutely.
to do? Should I have made one for everybody, or just?
Just hand it to the clerk, and she can put it in for the record.
Thank you so much.
Thank you. Anybody else who would like to speak either in favor or against this zoning change from commercial to residential? Since there's a lot of people moving up, I'm assuming that everybody else is here for a fence.
Hi,
Yes, okay.
my name is Jean Galeb. I live at 188 Canonchit Drive.
Thank you.
And if you'd bear with me.
Absolutely.
My internet was out and I waited till the last minute, and I could not print my comments. They're not that long. So I took a picture of it. I support the request for a variance to change the Borden property that abuts property on Canonchit Drive from commercial to residential. When I first moved here 39 years ago, none of the commercial property on East Main Road near Village Way was developed. There was no stoplight at the intersection. A bank and eventually an office building were built at the top of our street where we live on Canonchit. The strip plaza was built on the other side of Village Way. Some businesses lasted there, others didn't. I was grateful when Dunkin' Donuts came to the plaza. It brought more traffic, but it seemed like a better fit for the neighborhood than a business like McDonald's. Canonchit Drive may have always been used as a shortcut from surrounding areas to East Main Road. Excuse me. But it became much more heavily used when Dunkin' Donuts opened in the plaza. After the stoplight was added at East Main Road and Village Way, more cars than ever raced up and down Canonchit Drive in front of my house. And my husband and I had 3 children and raised them there. We've been there all this time. We love the neighborhood. It was easier for drivers to pull out onto East Main Road with a light rather than from a side street with just a stop sign. And they could get their coffee at the same time. So traffic has increased greatly over the years. Another plaza was built not too long ago at Potomac and East Main. This most likely has caused an increase in traffic in the neighborhood as well. During all these years, the Borden property has remained the same. I wasn't even aware that the back of the property is zoned commercial until recently. To me, the Borden's request for a variance to zone it residential is a gift to our beautiful neighborhood. We don't need any more commercial development in our area. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Is there anyone else who would like to speak either in favor or against this petition?
Good evening. My name is Richard Wida. My address is 206 Canonchit Drive.
Thank you.
One of the things I wanted to mention tonight is, of course, that I urge you to approve this motion that's come before you for a couple of reasons. And one of the biggest and most significant reason is that you have a plot of property there, 6.4 acres approximately. Huge commercial area that could be developed. Now, I'm not a developer. I'm just thinking as a neighbor. I've been there 40 years. I'd like to see the footprint of that commercial area shrunk. So the options that could be, hopefully will not be, but hopefully when that area is shrunk by 2.4 acres, what can go in the front for commercial development will be limited. It would be a lot less than what would be available if it was 6.4 acres. The other part is that I can't emphasize enough what a good job that's been done to the front house, the Borden property, the historic house located on East Main Road. As I said, I grew up in Portsmouth. went to school in Portsmouth, always lived in Portsmouth, and we've always admired that house. John Borden and his wife have done a great job keeping that up, and I applaud them, their efforts. It's not easy to maintain an older home, as everyone knows. So for those two reasons, I would urge you to consider to approve this motion so we can have what I feel would be a better neighborhood for all of us. Thank you so much.
Thank you, sir. Anyone else? This is an open public hearing. I will ask 3 times before the council closes the hearing and makes a decision and has further discussion if need be. So, one more time. Absolutely. Please come up.
I'm Karen Shea, 33 Canonchit. I just have a very quick comment that, with all due respect, that the people who are speaking don't live around where that driveway, which could become a road if duplexes are in there. I mean residential, but I'm hearing, it could be 4 duplexes, could be low-income housing, 2-way road going in there. I mean, and I live right across the street. So for those of us who live around there, the traffic coming in and out, I would not have a problem with it if it were zoned residential, but that could not be the way in and out, what could be a road in and out. I mean, why can't it go out to East Main Road? And I think that would be more acceptable. So anybody who said, I hear what they're saying, but they don't live right there. They're not going to be dealing with the traffic that's coming in and out. I mean, those cars would back into my driveway if they came in and out, So I think for me, that's the problem. I don't really understand how that was ever approved in the beginning by the planning board. I mentioned at the zoning board meeting, I feel like that decision was unethical, honestly, from the beginning for, Mr. Borden, before he sold that, to slice that out. I just can't imagine doing that. I mean, my property is a rectangular piece of land, and there's a rectangular piece of land behind me with a house on it. And I just think if I bought that house and wanted to sell it, but before I sold it, I wanted a driveway down to Water Street, so I could cut right down to Water Street. So I cut that out before I sold the house on a square acre, on a square plot of land, without telling the person that I was selling the house to. To me, that seems unethical. But somebody allowed that, the planning board allowed that. In my opinion, that's the problem. Mr. Gavin is saying that's not your concern, or you're not, it's not within the authority of the town council to talk about that. The zoning board said the same thing. So what do? Go back 20 years, and how did that decision get passed? Something seems very wrong with that decision. But anyway, that's just that. I think the concerns of those around where there could be a road going in and out are very different than the people who aren't living there.
And I agree with you 100%. Is there anybody else who would like to speak for or against this petition? One last time. Do I have a motion to close the hearing?
So,
Close the hearing.
second.
All those in favor? Aye. Opposed? Motion passes 5-0. The council will now deliberate as to whether or not to grant the petition to change this from C1 to R20. I do hear the concerns. I think the concerns that the abutters have, especially Ms. Shea and Mrs. Lewis, who are close abutters can be addressed in the planning process. The council's sole purpose here is not to litigate how the development is built, it's to decide whether or not this zoning change fits within the current comprehensive plan. In my view, having it left commercial would allow for the possibility of even more impactful development for that area. And having a residential area would allow you for greater buffers. And again, your voices will be heard in front of the planning board once a final plan comes forth. So you can all look at it, comment on it, decide if it fits within it, ask for your setbacks, ask for your any buffers that you would like to be put in place, but that's not the purview of the council. We are here strictly to decide whether or not this zoning change fits within the comprehensive plan. Anybody else on the council have any comments? Mr. Gleason?
Thank you, Mr. President. I would agree with your comments, and I would further add regarding the commercial side of development that the end results would be more negative than a residential area, in my viewpoint. And I say that with the thoughts that Portsmouth is always saying we need more commercial development, because I believe we're 70% residential, 20% commercial, and 10% small business. The numbers, compared to Middletown, compared to Newport, other communities, we residential people are paying for most of the taxes in town. We're always looking, we have a director of business development that wants to bring other businesses into town. So from that standpoint, that's a big piece of land that could all be commercial developed, okay? So I think that the proposal, while not final, and there's an escape route here, that you'll have another chance to bring your points up on how a future development would look, at the planning board level. We haven't got to that point. We're just deciding commercial versus residential. So I will be supporting this proposal because I think, while we're not going to satisfy everybody, and that's always a big concern being a town councilor, we're never going to get satisfaction to everyone. I think this proposal is in the best interest of all, for the town of Portsmouth, as opposed to keeping it commercial. Thank you.
Anybody else? Mr. Giuffre? Go ahead.
I would just say that if you look at the map, you're looking at a sea of houses, or the letter C, and then what's being proposed is kind of the center part of it turning residential, and it just seems that sitting on the town council, we've heard so many cases where there's an dispute between residential residences and people who are running businesses, and this would be moving towards having a bad abutter situation getting more resolved. And so for that reason, and also for the reason that the concerns that have been raised by the people who oppose this amendment will be addressable, and they will have a day to have their concerns heard when an actual proposal to do more than what's existing is put before a public body. Then they'll have a chance to make comments. For those two reasons, I would support making this amendment as well.
Mr. Aguirre or Mr. Ryan?
I will jump in. Thank you. And again, I do echo the comments of the president and the other councilors. And I spent a number of years on the zoning board and listening to planning board petitions come before us. And rarely do you see this type of opportunity where you can provide an additional buffer to those residential properties. A lot of the commercial developments that come into town really just have to comply with special use criteria. And, some properties, if they could come in and develop this into things that the town would have no say in by reducing this commercial footprint. And again, there's no saying that commercial property would ever get developed, but it could. The zoning goes with the land. I think reducing that footprint, adding this additional residential area to the rear of that property, in the long run, will benefit those residents. And I know it's change, and I know that I don't live right there, and I know that it's going to be a change for some of the abutters if this thing moves forward. But I also believe in the process, and you would get another shot at any development that were to occur. Anything has to go back before the planning board. And these are the opportunities that are your avenues to get the additional buffers, to get possible screening. And I think that's, I know that you feel pretty jaded based on what happened at the zoning board. And again, I apologize for that. In 15 years on the zoning board, I never saw anything occur like that. And we, as counselors, we take our job serious. As zoning board members, as planning board members, they take their jobs very serious. And, I would like to believe in the process, and I would like to, hope that in the future, at planning board meetings and zoning board meetings, that the meetings can have, better dialogue, and that there can be better communication. I do think that this is a good approach here, and I would also be supporting this petition.
Mr. Ryan.
It seems what we're being asked here is whether we have decided that the planning board was correct in saying that redesignating this property from commercial to residential was consistent with the town plan, and evidently they did. As far as what happens once the land starts to be developed, it strikes me that the planning board really couldn't comment on that until a specific proposal for development was put forward, how many lots there were going to be, what was going to be on those lots, and that if this does go forward, that once that happens, it's only then that Mr. Borden can actually put forth a plan for a proposal for development, subdividing into lots, and it is during that process, I think, that abutters can actually get a remedy from the planning board. So I think, since we are being asked a very narrow question, whether redesignating this from commercial to residential is consistent with the town plan, we have no reason to not make that decision based on the question we're being asked, and so I also will support this proposal.
I will once again apologize, as Mr. Aguirre just did. I think I can speak for all the members who are here tonight, that the actions and the attitude, and if you want to call it abuse, and I wasn't there, but I'm sure it was abusive, that was put forth last week in the zoning board meeting, has no place in any meeting, whether it's here at the council, the zoning board, or the planning board. What happens because of that situation is not on the agenda tonight, but it will be dealt with. I haven't sat on the board with John, but I've known John for 7, 8, 9 years now. I think of him as a very honest man. I think if the neighbors sit down and have an honest conversation and say, these are the things we're concerned about, he'll sit and listen. I have pleaded at this council level multiple times for neighbors to sit down and just have a cup of coffee and try and figure out a way to keep yourselves from becoming the Hatfields and McCoys. And I think there's an easy solution for this, just to sit down and have a cup of coffee or a beer if that makes it easier. Having the ability to set forth further buffers in a residential development will be much greater than if this is left commercial. And a lot of your fears will be addressed easier in a residential development than it would be in a commercial development. You're not going to have, as was mentioned, this is basically the size of Clements. You're not going to have security lights, floodlights, extra worry about drainage and runoff coming off of the property. So I think a lot of your concerns will be addressed in that planning board process once a plan is put forth by Mr. Borden, or if he does choose to sell the property, whatever developer it is would have to go through the planning board process. Councilor care to make a motion on the petition?
I move that we approve the change designation of this plot from commercial to residential. Is that accurate?
Specifically C1 to R20.
Specifically C1 to R20.
Second.
Any further discussion by the council?
Just if you would add the plot numbers, I think, to the motion, I think would be beneficial.
How about just making your motion starting after where it says planning board there? Mr. Ryan.
The zone's approximately 2.4.
Rezone approximately.
Here. It's right on the...
Okay, so to reflect, so I move that we redesignate plot 31, lot 32C from C1 commercial to R20 residential. Is that adequate?
Well, the motion would be to rezone approximately 2.4 acres of parcels currently known as 2951 East Main Road, C31-32, and 2967 East Main Road, 31-32A, from C1 Commercial District to R20 Residential District.
Shall I try one more time?
You could just say so moved.
Okay, that's so moved.
Okay. And a second by Ms. Ujifusa.
Second.
Okay. Any further discussion? That covers you, Mr. Peaslee?
That's clearer, yes.
Okay.
Thank you.
All those in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? The motion passes 5-0. Thank you all for coming out tonight. Again, I apologize for behavior from last week, and I only hope that your treatment was better tonight, or at least you felt safer and better treated. We're going to do old business number 2. Mr. Rayner, request approval for the promotion of Mr. Brian Woodhead to the Director of Public Works.
Yes, Mr. President, as most people know, our DPW Director, Dave Q., was injured on duty in the spring of 2016. Due to his injuries, he's been unable to return to work and has accepted a disability pension. In accordance with the Portsmouth Town Charter, Article 3, Section 304C, I hereby submit my request for your ratification of the appointment of Mr. Brian Woodhead as the next Director of Public Works. Brian has been an exemplary employee of the town for over 20 years and has served as Deputy Director of the department since 2003. In July of 2016, Brian became the Acting Director of Public Works due to Mr. Q's injury. I won't read them all, but I've included in the backup highlights, which are just the tip of the iceberg of Mr. Woodhead's accomplishments during his tenure as the Acting Director. I'd like to stress that I have closely worked with Brian on a day-to-day basis over the last 2 years. He has proven to be an excellent department head. He has demonstrated expertise in public works, demonstrates strict adherence to his fiduciary responsibilities to our town, and he has gained the respect and confidence of all who work with and for him. He is capable, confident, and committed to our mission of extraordinary service, and I respectfully ask for your concurrence.
Mr. President, if I could so move. There have been concerns raised in the council. I know that there is a process that ought to be followed, but I think in this case, Mr. Woodhead has essentially been doing the job for which he's being proposed for 2 years. Just going through the things that he's done and the things that I know that he's done for this town, to bring in somebody new who doesn't know the town as well as he does, who hasn't been doing the work, would delay, I think, and probably impinge upon the efficiency of the DPW. So I would move to support Mr. Rayner's recommendation to formally appoint Mr. Woodhead to be the Director of Public Works, a position which he has essentially been performing for the past 2 years.
Is there a second for discussion?
Second.
Any discussion or questions for Mr. Rayner? I will state that I think Brian has done a fantastic job over the past 2 years, stepping in when David got hurt, taking care of some pretty large projects, including $2 million for the paving that required the use of barges and ramps and
Over on
on Prudence Island. Multiple large snowstorms over the past couple of years, and I think Brian has respect of the employees down there, and I think he'll do a great job as a permanent director. Sorry, almost made you permanent deputy.
He has knocked down our mailbox a couple of times.
He's taking up pieces of my front lawn, too. Literally.
He always puts it back.
I think you deserved it.
Mr. Gleason?
It may have been Brian himself, because I know part of that job is him and Dave had to get out there and drive trucks as well as our union personnel.
Yes.
Not something I would want to do at 2 in the morning. I had just raised a concern. I asked to see the job description on here. And I think there's some weaknesses in the technical, requests for what a person's minimum requirements are for this position. I know the town has talked about having an engineer on staff, and we still don't have it. I'm hoping someday we get to that point. But I wanted to say publicly that I will support the promotion of Brian Woodhead, because I think the positives on his part outweigh the negatives in my mind that could be improved upon. There's small items compared to the big items that you've brought to the town. I have mentioned to Mr. Rayner, my own personal view is that I think some of the things that we do in DPW need to be changed in the future. I think you'll hear more from me on that in the future. I think I'd make make some suggestions, and I urge other citizens, if they see things that they like or do not like. I think that each department has changed over the years. We have a new police chief. Now we've stepped into a new era where we have a new fire chief, and I think people bring things with them from their previous employers. Some could be negative, some could be positive. But I think that some of the things that we've been doing for the days of Marcel Napert I think we're still doing them, and I think they need to be looked at. So I'll end at that, but I will be supporting that, and I hope that we can continue to improve the department. I'll leave it at that.
Okay.
I just actually want to say that I think Brian is doing an amazing job, and I'm not sure what deficiencies you're talking about, but I would like to point out that what I've seen is that the town analyzes, with the help of a private company, the condition of the roads every 3 years, and that Brian and the staff has helped determine the best procedures for road repair, that we have a real maintenance plan for our roads that makes sense. That's in contrast to other folks who may not have a maintenance plan, and I do feel that we need to reward the kind of behavior that allows this town to save money and do things really efficiently, and it's because of incredibly dedicated people like Brian that we are able to do that. He handles emergencies. He is excellent at planning. I cannot speak highly enough of him, and I would very enthusiastically vote to approve him to be the director.
I too would also like to support Mr. Woodhead on this. It was an unfortunate situation. He'll tell you he's probably trained by one of the best, right? And I think Brian has done an excellent job. I mean, to be put into that position, he's basically held both positions as the acting director and the deputy director, and that's been a lot of responsibility, and I don't think we've missed a beat. We've taken on some pretty big projects. We've had some pretty bad snowstorms. The roads were all taken care of last year, and I think that's a testament to their hard work. So again, I would also be supporting Mr. Woodhead on this.
To just finish up one thing.
Sure.
Since it was asked to me that, or it was suggested that, I guess I should clarify the point that I thought was deficient was the minimum required qualifications background, if you will. But since we don't have our money man here, Mr. Kessin here, can I just ask what the financial implications are of this position, if there are any, in this budget year? Do you have any problems with dollars?
No, there's no issue. I mean, we've been working without a person in the deputy director position for over 2 years, so in essence, we've saved money. It's not a condition that we want to continue, but it is what we have.
Well, we've been paying 2 people, so to speak. Correct?
No.
No.
Workers' comp was paying.
Right.
Okay.
That's through insurance.
After
yes.
a certain period of time. Okay.
Different pot of money than the budget.
Got it.
But yes. In the long run, yes, we've been paying 2 people.
Yes.
All those in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion passes 5-0. Brian, congratulations. Thank you, Mr. Kehoe. Enjoy your retirement, sir.
Thank you. Take care of yourself.
And be safe. No more climbing on rocks. Next up, new business number 1. Discussion and action. Permission to build Adirondack chairs to be placed at the Brown House for a senior project. Patrick, how happy were you? You got to sit through all that and got to see how the sausage is made, huh?
That was something. That was something.
Proceed.
Mr. President, Mr. Members of the council, my name is Patrick Renaud, 40 Point Road. For my senior project, I propose to build 2 Adirondack chairs to be placed at the Brown House at the 70 Fields in Portsmouth. After discussions with Brian Woodhead and the Parks and Recreation Director, we decided that was the best place just for people to sit and enjoy the scenery here in Portsmouth. Also, my uncle, which I'm sure you're aware of, Craig Clark, played a pretty big role in the restoration of the Brown House, so I think that these chairs would just add a little more to that. My mentor, Sarah Macedo, is here. I'd say she's had a pretty lengthy background in woodworking, and she just helped me to properly construct the chairs.
Fantastic. I think it's a wonderful idea, and I could see people sitting on that front porch in the Adirondack chairs, just like you said, enjoying the scenery, a soccer game, a lacrosse match, horses going by.
Thank you.
And I think it would be a great idea. Do I have a motion to approve Patrick's request?
So moved.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion passes 5-0. Patrick, good luck.
Thank you. Have a good night.
Next up, new business number 2. Discussion and action, request the town council ask the Navy to restore the fence surrounding Tank Farm 4 to its original 70-year-old location. And a sample resolution is attached from the residents of Redwood Farms and Overlook Point. Good evening.
Good evening. My name is Amy Mullen, 38 Harborview Road. Mr. President, members of the council, you have a sample proclamation resolution asking for your support. We have been engaged with the Navy for quite some time about this fence issue. The neighborhood in Redwood Farms and Overlook Point condominiums have asked the Navy to leave the fence where it has been. We've been in discussions with them and are awaiting some information about how much of the Tank Farm 4 area the solar farm is going to need exactly. They need a 50-foot buffer between the solar farm cells and the rest of the area. So we're still awaiting that information, but we do have a petition potentially asking to come back to you to request an easement. That had been suggested from the Navy liaison, that the town could ask for an easement and perhaps that would be granted. There are still a lot of unknowns, so right now I think just a motion of support would be something that we could ask for at this time.
So I have one quick question for you. Which Navy liaison? Do you
Cornelia
remember?
Muller.
She suggested the town asking for an easement.
Yes.
Okay. That's all I need to know. Okay. I know this is, I don't think it's risen to the level of contentiousness, but it's a disturbing issue that people have gone on with their lives for the past 40, 50 years, thinking that their property was X and it's now Y. The Navy has been very good neighbors to us. They continue to have an open mind. We've had discussions with them, Mr. Rayner, myself, and Mr. Crosby. Oh, there he is. He's still back there. Met with them last week after you had the meeting on the 29th to explore avenues to help this. I am not against putting forth a resolution to ask them as part of the overall package. I don't know if the wording specifically would be the same way. There might be some words to take out of there. But I'm not against that. Again, I think the Navy still wants to be, and Captain Johnson still wants to be a good neighbor, and try and find an amicable solution for everybody here. And as you stated, the final plan of how big and where those cells are going to go is still in process.
Right.
They still have to go to DEM, probably CRMC, to figure out what's wetlands, what's not, where they can put the panels, and exactly how many they're going to need to get to the level at which they've agreed to with the Navy.
Right. I think it's our hope that we can retain the character of our neighborhoods and the condominiums, and that we don't lose any value to our properties with the placement of a fence.
Agreed. Just be aware that if the placement of the fence goes back to where it was, there may be increased property values because now you are gaining property that you weren't necessarily taxed on in the past. Okay. Just
Yes.
Just-
No good deed goes unpunished.
I understand.
No
pressure. I just want you to know that if your property just went from 30,000 square feet to 40,000 square feet, the
Right.
tax man may come in.
Yes.
Just
Yes.
So everybody is on, there's no,
Right.
no, I know I didn't make any friends.
I think we all understand that.
But I am of the, making sure everybody understands the
Right.
ramifications that could happen. So,
So,
Mr. Wright.
Mr. President, I mean, we obviously can't control what the Navy does and does not do with their fence, but I think as the town council, we at least have a duty to support the well-being of the citizens of the town, and so I would move that we support this petition regarding the fence relocation at Navy Tank Farm 4.
Second for discussion. I would just ask our town solicitor possibly to make sure that the resolution has a clause in it that specifies what the request is, that it's not just to support, but support that the Navy not move the fence in a way that negatively affects our residents. And secondly, I'd add language sending the resolution to our state and federal legislators so that they can be asked to work on our constituents' behalf as well. So I would make sure that the resolution get modified to reflect those two items.
Would you like to take up that action and modify that resolution? Or are you asking our solicitor to modify it?
I can give you the language is pretty straightforward.
If you would like to write up the language.
Sure.
And I can sign it once you're done with it, if the council doesn't have any objections.
I think the clerk and myself can tweak this a little bit. And
Okay.
come up with appropriate language for the president.
Okay. Mr. Gleason?
Just for clarification, are you suggesting in the talks that you had with the Navy that they're going to sell these property owners land to increase their own property boundaries?
That wasn't necessarily part of the discussion at this point.
I believe at the public meeting I attended, that the Navy specifically said they are not allowed to sell the property and that that's why they're leasing it.
Leasing it, to the solar
Solar
developer?
developer,
Yes.
yes.
Okay. That's what was confusing. I don't think they can sell that to individual, sell that buffer piece. So do we want to put in that resolution that we are seeking an easement? Is that the
No,
solution
because
we
I think
want?
that's premature. We have to, there are so many issues that still need to be resolved. I mean, they didn't identify the reasons the fence have to be moved, the legal reasons. They didn't identify whether there are any mitigating circumstances that they're willing to take into account.
Well,
There's just a lot.
There's multiple issues.
Right.
That need to be ironed out. We'll leave it at that. But, I mean, there are pieces of the fence that went through wetlands that I don't think the DEM will allow them to go back through wetlands. That type of thing.
But not in the area that we're concerned with.
For the most part, no. But
Pretty black and white,
the-
I would
well-
say.
The original plan, or the original thought process of the layout of the solar panels put some of those panels within that 50-foot buffer. If the fence line was to stay where it was, excuse me, not where it is.
Okay.
So I think some of that has to be ironed out. Until there's a final plan that goes through PUC, DEM, CRMC,
We
and
don't
comes
know.
back, we don't know exactly
Okay.
what those buffers may or may not be.
They just have a target number of 10 megawatts and
Well, apparently Solar Breakers LLC, the lessee, is doing an analysis that will be completed in October of 2018. That's
Right.
what was announced at the meeting.
And as the fence, at this point, there's no construction that is supposed to be started until that March, April timeframe based on the timeline that they've shared last week. 2 weeks ago. 2 weeks ago.
Okay. So just the last question. Everybody that has signed that petition is happy with what's in the resolution? Are you like the spokesperson now? I know I spoke with Mrs. Perry at one point. What you have in there is what you want to see.
I believe it is.
Okay. All right, thank you.
Okay. And you're okay with the solicitor and the clerk tweaking a couple things just to make it more resolution-y?
Yes. Yes, please.
Yeah, some more forthwith and whereas and, yeah.
What for?
Maybe put a little bit of the history behind it and all that good
Yeah.
stuff. Okay. We did have a motion and a second for discussion, so we are all set to say, all those in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion passes 5-0. Thank you all very much for coming out tonight. New business number 3, request approval for Glen Farm Special Events Fields for Rhode Island Women's Soccer League Newport Spinnaker for a home game September 16th, October 14th, 28th, from 9:45 to 12 o'clock.
Move to approve.
Second.
Any questions, Mr. Gleason, Mr. Aguirre? No? All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed?
Payment, I didn't have to speak?
No.
Perfect.
But thank you. We trust Wendy's opinion. You can if you'd like. Okay. New business number 4. I guess I'll give it 1 second. Discussion and action, request to approve adding R&A Auto Body to the police department's authorized tow list. Chief.
Good evening. We had a request from a tow company to be added to our tow vendor list. We reviewed the documentation. They are going to operate a lot on East Main Road, and we believe this will improve our capacity for towing vehicles, our options by having an additional vendor. So we'd have a total of 3 for the town now instead of 2.
Okay. Is there a motion to approve?
Motion to approve.
Seconded.
Mr. Gleason?
I just would question whether this was a bid process, or as far as the finance department goes, is this a legitimate way
It
to
hasn't
add?
been a bid process, no. We usually get contacted by vendors. We've been contacted by many different companies. Most of them are in Fall River or Cranston.
Yep.
We require you to have a lot in the town of Portsmouth. So this is the only vendor we've had since I don't know when that has another lot.
So the other 2 you use don't have lots? They're just...
No, our other 2 vendors are staying. This would be an additional vendor.
Okay, but they have lots as well? You have
Yes.
3 vendors with lots in town?
In town.
Okay, all right, thank you.
And is there a standard charge? Are all 3 vendors charged?
They're all charged the same.
$50?
Yes,
Okay.
it's a standard charge.
I'm not setting your price, I'm just throwing out a number.
Yep. Yeah, it's actually, these guys are here.
My name's Richard Ullman, 2793 East Main Road, owner of R&A Auto Body. It's all state mandated as far as what we can charge and the storage fees and everything like that. So we're all going to be on the same page as the other tow companies in the town.
Perfect, thank you. Any further questions? All those in favor? Aye. Opposed? Motion passes 5-0. Welcome aboard. Thank you. New business number 5, discussion and action, update the Quinnic Island Land Trust Spruce Acres Little Creek Preserve. This was requested by Ms. Pedro, but she's not here tonight, but since you're here tonight, Chuck, please go forward.
So I think this was pulled from correspondence by Councilwoman Pedro at the request of Mrs. Grieve, who is here tonight. And we were going to discuss whatever her concerns are. So I would just suggest that we continue the matter until your next council meeting. I can give you the update that we have finally, after 6 months, received the physical alteration permit from DOT, and we are almost ready. Once East Coast Construction is ready to go, we're about to start construction on an environmental parking lot, a pervious parking lot with 2 curb cuts so that it will finally be open for public access.
Okay.
We're looking forward to that.
Are you available to come back on the
I am.
27th? Okay.
Yep.
All right. So do we have a motion, actually, to just move this to the next council meeting on to old business on the 24th?
So moved.
Seconded.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion passes 5-0. Thank you, Chuck. Thanks for sitting through the night. Mr. Kessin asked, because he was not here tonight because of a death in the family, that we table item number 6 and move it to the next council meeting. But the 24th is unavailable for the AIPC because they have another event, so they would like to do it on the first meeting in October, which is the 9th. So do I have a motion to forward this, move this to October 9th council meeting?
Second.
All those in favor? Aye. Opposed? Motion passes 5-0. We have lots of correspondence from the CRMC. Public notice of proposed rulemaking for Rhode Island Coastal Resources Management Program, Quinnic Island SAMP Coastal Development Regulations. Public notice of proposed rulemaking for energy amendments. Public notice for proposed rulemaking Rhode Island Coastal Resources Management Program guidelines for the development of municipal harbor plans. Public notice and a proposed rulemaking for Rhode Island Coastal Resource Management Program Coastal and Estuarine Land Conservation Program. And number 5 is the Portsmouth Water and Fire District's quarterly financial report for the period ending July 31st, 2018. We have a motion to receive those and place them on file.
Move to receive and place on file, all 5 items.
Is there a second?
Second.
All those in favor? Aye. Opposed? Motion passes 5-0.
Mr. President.
Yes, Mr. Gleason.
Just to err on the side of caution, I'm going to recuse myself from item 5. I don't think it's really an issue, but
okay.
I'm approving 1 through 4.
Well, you can approve 5. It's just putting it in place and on file. That's not an issue. It's not an action.
Funny things can happen.
It's not an action. Okay. We have future meetings. We are going to have a very quick meeting on September 13th. It's Thursday at 5:30 for a public hearing for a noise variance for Thrive Coffee Shop for an event they're having this weekend with some amplified music outside. On the 15th, we have our annual excursion over to Prudence Island, which will be at 12 o'clock, to be at the Union Church again, I believe, correct? Yes, okay. And then September 24th, we have a regular council meeting, and October 9th, which will be a Tuesday because it's the Monday of Columbus Day weekend. We will be here at 7 o'clock. Any other business from the council? If not, do we have a motion to adjourn?
Move to adjourn.
Second.
All those in favor? Aye. Opposed? Motion passes 5-0. Thank you, everybody.